everyone out there. Welcome to this edition of CareNet TV. Today we have Janette Chun, and she is from Temecula, California. Did I say that right?
You said it right.
Great,
Yes.
great. I was practicing in my head, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to have an opportunity to speak with you and to learn a bit more about what you're doing. Now, first and foremost, I mean, you're in California. And it is a crazy time out there. I've had a couple of trips out there over the last year, and certainly following what's been happening legislatively, and certainly your governor has an enormous bee in his bonnet around pregnancy centers. So first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about kind of what you're seeing on the ground there, and kind of what your efforts have been related to some of the challenges that you and your other colleagues out there have been facing.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable thing that they would even come after pregnancy centers, because obviously we're a great addition to the community and providing the services we need. Our parents need, our families need pregnancy centers. One of the things I've noticed is just their absolute vehemence against anything that goes against the California narrative of abortion on demand at any time. And the fact that they would even come after us, it's not as if we're making this massive dent even in the Planned Parenthoods or the family plannings. It's more that we are providing women who seek other alternatives. And that should be allowed in a free speech society, and in a society where everybody has the right to be able to obtain services that they need. One of the things I've noticed is that I live in a much more conservative area than some of my other colleagues. In order for us to be able to keep a pulse on what's happening, I've gone and gotten very, very involved in the political world out here, so that I know all of our city council members, all of our school board members in each of the cities that we're in. We have made great effort to know our assembly members, and they give us heads up when things are happening and when things are coming down the pike, and we can start praying and asking the Lord, what should we do and how should we do it? I think a lot of it is this gain and this desire to bring in an ideology that, in our opinion, is just purely a satanic ideology of death. And we're starting to really approach it like that, not anymore like, well, a woman just needs a right to choose. We're just not looking at it that way anymore, because that's not where they're coming from. It's a very different journey we're on now.
Yeah, no, there really has been a tremendous shift. I mean, I think one of the things for me that it kind of, there's two things actually that really expose what you're talking about. The first thing is just the resistance to an abortion reversal procedure of any type, and which makes no sense, because if your perspective is that I'm pro-choice and therefore I support whatever choice a woman makes. My issue is that she needs to have the right to make it. So if she chooses to bring her child into the world, support that choice. If she chooses to abort their child, support that choice. And it would just seem to me that if a woman goes into a pregnancy center and chooses to then have an abortion, they would that's basically a reversal, right? So she went to a pregnancy center, said, I'm going to bring this child into the world. And then she decided to reverse what the decision that she'd made in that moment and go have an abortion. Where they're totally supportive of that. In other words, that's an abortion reversal right there, right? But if she goes to a abortion clinic and starts to have the abortion procedure, and then says, you know what, actually, I really want to bring my child into the world instead, they resist that. So it really exposes it. And I think the other thing too is, some of the laws that we've seen in some other states that have not been able to get passed. For example, I think Montana is the one that comes to mind, where they had a referendum, if you will, on the books, or they were voting for, rather, that if a child somehow survives the gauntlet of the abortion procedure and lives through all of that, still lives, it's ensuring that child would then, who now is outside the womb, this isn't even an abortion question anymore, outside the womb, struggling for life like any other newborn, that you have to render care, you have to render aid to that child. And no, they rejected that as well. So it really does show, where this is coming from. I paid for, basically a dead baby. So I want a dead baby. It's absolute consumer orientation, but it really, even there, it's only on one side of the choice that the consumer should have, only
That's
the
right.
choice that I want them to make. So it's very astute for you to sort of pick that up. So So have you been impacted sort of directly? I mean, have you guys had protests at your centers or any of those kinds of things related to what you've been doing?
We've had attempted protests at our centers. We have, in fact, one of my center directors is actually the city councilwoman for Temecula, and she's made a lot of waves with trying to move forward some just very simple procedures.
Yeah.
We keep her very separate. You know, birth choice is her job, but she does city council on the side. And it's a very separated position she has. But because she has said some things, they tried to come after birth choice
I see.
because of the things that she has said in support of
Hmm.
pro-life. Now,
Yeah.
some of the other council members do support that position. But at the same time, it's very foolish of anybody to think that the fight isn't going to come. And
Yeah.
so we are getting prepared with very good training. We have security measures.
Yeah.
We have very clear scripts that we use so that nothing can be taken and misconstrued in any way. But
Hmm.
many phone calls, mean emails, things like that definitely are there.
Yeah.
We just look at it as they don't understand what they're saying and they're lost. And that means it's an opportunity to start praying for that person. And
Yeah.
so that they can come to know the truth and that truth can set them free from the darkness that they're in.
Yeah, no, I've only been in this work about 10 years. You mean, and one of the things that, and compared to other folks, that might seem like I'm a toddler in a lot of ways, but one of the things I can tell you just in my own spiritual journey in this work is really the just challenge to love your enemy,
Yes.
and to sacrificially love your enemy. And I've just been inspired recently about the whole notion about the great commandment and the call to love our neighbor as ourselves. And when Christ gave that call, the word for love that's used there is agapeo love, right? Sacrificial love. But that's the same word that's used when Christ calls us to love our enemies too. So it's a real high calling, and it's tough in this work when you see what's happening and when you see how people are coming at you. It can be very, very challenging.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. So tell me a little bit about your center, the history of your center. How long have you been there, and just sort of the nature? What's life like in Temecula?
So I started out actually in 2013. A friend of mine, we went to church together, and I did not know we had a pregnancy center in our area. And he asked me if I would join the board because I was sharing my testimony about a teen pregnancy that I had. And my son was special needs and all the different journeys that I went through and the difficulties I faced and how the Lord helped me through them. And he thought you would be great on our board. So I applied for the board and I was received on the board. At that time, they were having a transition and their executive director was going to be leaving. And we went through many, many months of interviews, and they kept saying, we don't have the right person. We need to find the right person. And I kept feeling the Lord tell me to throw my hat in the ring. And I didn't want to at the time. If I can just be perfectly honest,
Yeah.
my youngest son was graduating high school in 2014, and my husband was a teacher, and I wanted to go on vacation all summer with him and just enjoy life after raising three children, one of them being special needs, which is a great challenge. And I thought it was my time to just go have fun and enjoy the rest of our time together.
Yeah.
That wasn't what the Lord had in planned. I had been a lay biblical counselor for a very long time, and I
Mm.
actually counseled teen pregnant moms and at my church and at other places that they would come to me. And I did a lot of crisis counseling as well. So it seemed very natural just to go into that role for a little while as a volunteer.
Mm.
And finally, after a number of board meetings, one time the Lord did not let me leave a meeting. My stomach actually became so sick, I could not leave that place. It hurt so bad, I had to sit down. And my friend, who was the board president at the time, he just looked at me and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not. The Lord is not going to let me leave until I throw my hat in the ring." And he says, "Finally, we've only been waiting for months." And that literally started the journey. 2 months later, I was hired as the executive director for that center. And that center was really in trouble. And it took a couple years, but we pulled that center out of trouble. And that's how I started my journey. It was reluctant. I I think that's a part of the testimony, though, that if we can obey what God asks us to do, He has a greater plan than our own ease and comfort sometimes.
Yeah.
And the tools that He raises us up with, He intends for us to use for His kingdom.
Yeah.
And so
You're
I
right.
had to decide, do I want Jeanette's way of vacation during the summer, or do I want God's way of kingdom living and obeying the cost of service? And
Mm,
so that's what I did. And we, after that, a few years, the Hemet Center near us was going to close down. So they asked
mm,
us to take them. And
mm.
then there was a mobile ministry that needed somebody else to manage it, and we took them as well. And then a few years after that, we took on the Palm Desert Center because they came and asked us to take them. So
Wow.
we now have all of these centers within 5 years of me starting this journey. And it's been unbelievable, but it's been a definite God journey.
Gotcha. So what's the demographics there? What's the community like in terms of racial profile or economic demographics? I'm sure
Mhm.
it's beautiful.
We love it. Temecula is very beautiful. It's like
Yeah.
a wine country,
Yeah.
and we have a lot. It's like Napa 2.0, I
Oh
guess you
wow.
can say. So the Temecula itself is diverse. There are areas that are lower income, and then there are areas that are mid and high income. It just depends on what part of Temecula you live in. But being
Mm,
wine country, you could imagine we go from apartments to multi-million dollar ranches. It varies in between that.
wow.
Um, Temecula is a very beautiful place, and it's growing rapidly. Hemet is a different area that's down near us where one of our centers is, and that is a little bit. It has some areas that are on the more mid wealth side, but it's a very impoverished area in certain areas as well, as are the surrounding cities that we minister to. And then Palm Desert is the retirement capital of the world, I guess you can say.
So
And
not a lot of unplanned pregnancies there.
you know what? I have to tell you, it's been incredible because of the surrounding areas. We have Palm
Yeah.
Springs, Palm Desert, and Indio, and all of those areas that are around. We were shocked because because there's like a country club every block
Yeah.
that you walk on, there's also the areas that don't have that type of wealth.
Yeah.
And so that's the areas that we minister to. And it's been quite vast. In fact, throughout COVID, our material assistance and parenting programs, as well as our grief and loss program, it actually tripled because the
Wow.
need was so vast. And we're serving hundreds of women now in our programs out there. It's
Wow.
pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, because I imagine that also you've got a big service industry
Correct.
that's
That
out
is
there as well.
correct.
'Cause somebody's got to do all the stuff that
That's
keeps
right.
the folks retired, feeling retired, if you
That's
will. So
correct.
there's got to be a lot of folks that are connected in there that are probably
Yes.
a younger demographic. That so racial wise, Black, Hispanic, white. What's the mix there?
I would say that in Temecula, we have golly, I think it's a pretty good melting pot, if I'm being honest. A lot more Asian. My husband was Asian; he was Korean, and we were sometimes the only people we ever saw that was an Asian. But that's growing. We have a large Hispanic community. I would say that it's a mostly white community, I would
Mm,
say, but it's really growing in
yeah,
in its diversity.
gotcha.
Hemet definitely more Hispanic and than anything else, and then Palm Desert, that is a melting pot. I mean, you could just anywhere you go, you'll see that,
Yeah,
anybody who is there.
yep. So talk to me a little bit about sort of the post Roe environment, and sort of what you've seen in terms of your work, how it's changed, and then also, I mean, we've talked a bit about the kinds of things that can be discouraging, in terms of the legislative attacks and some of the cultural, the trauma, if you will, that's in
Yes.
the state when Roe got overturned. I'm sure it was just a madhouse. So talk to me a little bit about like how the work that you've done has changed since Roe was overturned, and then also give me just an insight into some things that you found encouraging, even in the midst of this difficult, sort of season for pregnancy
Okay.
centers.
One thing that I noticed almost immediately was the switch in ideology. Previously, before Roe, everybody felt uh, very emboldened. I felt like the state felt emboldened. They felt like they had all the power, they had all the authority.
Mm,
There was no hope or no options for those who were pro-life. We were just looked at as a byway. We weren't really much. You're just a little minority. Big deal. sweet, sweet little pregnancy center. We'd like to have you be quiet now, which is AB 775 came into play, where we were told to advertise everywhere. I think that
Right.
they saw the writing on the wall and were trying to preemptively strike us in those things. Obviously, the Supreme Court overturned that. So little by little, they've been putting in legislation with little bits of wording in it to try to build up to something greater again so they can squash our speech. But ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, it feels like it put them on their heels.
Mm.
It feels like there's a desperation now to push forth every single aberrant bill that they could possibly think of, even one that's going through right now. I believe maybe Buffy Wicks is putting it through. They want to change perinatal to up to 1 year old. No joke. It's so horrific you can't even imagine. And so that's a bill. They have bill after bill after bill after bill coming in California. So that tells me that even though they were trying to slyly put them through before,
Yeah.
now it's a bombardment. So it tells me they're on their heels. They feel a desperation to push something forward because it didn't go their way. I have a feeling that in California, people are getting very fed up with the darkness. I don't think they saw it until it really reared its ugly head. And now the people who cannot imagine having such ideology of unborn children who survived abortion, born children who survived abortion, having their lives eliminated, that to me, that's abhorrent. I know Democrats that are just could not believe that that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
truth is coming to light. I think even though Roe happened and they have a desperation and an anger over it, it caused them to overplay their hand. And
Mm-hmm.
because they're overplaying their hand now, it's exposing the truth of what their actual agenda is. And it's giving other people insight that they didn't have before, that were on the fence or didn't understand the fight.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Again, for me, it's sort of like, well, can't we at least agree that if a child survives an abortion, right, that we would render care to that child?
Yes. Yeah.
That if you're, walking down, the hall of a hospital and you look in a window and you see, a baby that's just been born, that's, it's just struggling, I imagine, you'd run and find medical folks and say, hey, what's going on? Take care of this child. And,
That's right.
the normal thing would be, oh, sure, absolutely. What happened? How do we? But no, the question would be, well, that's the wrong question to ask in that situation. The right question to ask in Montana is, was that child aborted?
Mm.
That's your first question. If it's yes, well then okay, well then we just move on. And I think that as people start to see that, I'm hopeful that there'll be a shift in mentality. I actually, for that particular example, I did wrote a piece on that, and we covered it on live chat and then also on Carecast, our podcast, because when I first read about what happened in Montana, I was reminded of the Dred Scott case. Some folks may not remember that, but essentially the case was Dred Scott was a slave and he got into a free territory.
Yeah.
And wanted to declare his freedom. And of course, his owner, who was not in a free territory, said, no, you're not free. And he said, I am. And that case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the court ruled that, no, you're still a slave. Right? So in other words, once a slave, always a slave. And I just thought about the parallel there. Now, for most folks, I would say the vast majority of folks who are on the pro-choice side would absolutely side on Dred Scott's side in terms of that decision and say this is an injustice. Of course, this man should be free. And this is, you look at Supreme Court decisions that were wrongly decided. This would absolutely be one that's wrongly decided because this man is a human being. He's got intrinsic worth, life, all that kind of stuff, and slavery is an injustice. But the parallel I saw that, if you're a child who's kind of marked for abortion, in a sense, you're in bondage in your mom's womb. That's right. Like you can't get out. And if somehow you survive that and now are, quote, in the free territory, right, you would hope that folks would say, yes, you would be free to ascribe to you your humanity. And what you're seeing here is actually the ideology is exactly the same ideology that kept Dred Scott a slave. It is exactly the same ideology that his worth was only determined by, the folks who owned him, if you will. And in this case, well, the mother's, quote, the owner of the child. If she's marked you for death, well, then that's what you'll get in the same way that your owner, your master has marked you for slavery, then that's exactly what you'll get as well. And it's hard for people. Like, I'm hopeful that we can just begin to start having these conversations with people, who say that they're for justice, and for mercy, and the rightly applying those things in the public square, to be able to see that same kind of scenario. Because again, in this case, we're not even having a conversation about when life begins or any of that. This is like, you're outside the womb, right? This isn't even an abortion discussion. This is a different discussion. But certainly,
it should be a no-brainer. It really should be. It should be a no-brainer. If a child is
should
born, it should be have the right to life.
Yeah. But, it's interesting because it's the reason it's not a no-brainer is because the mindset of an abortion decision is really that this is not a person, it's a consumer product.
That's right.
That's owned by someone else. And you just follow the logic of that. If it's a consumer product and this is a consumer transaction, if the doctor is a consumer provider of services, then what's the difference between, I asked you to fix my roof because it was leaking, and I come back home and it's still leaking. Well, what am I going to say? I asked for a leak-free roof, deliver a leak-free roof. I asked for an aborted baby, a dead fetus. Well, a dead baby. Well, deliver me a dead baby. So that mentality is the same, and it's just hard. I think hopefully when people see how stark that is, we can start to change in this nation. So let's talk a little bit about just as we kind of close up here, some of just the programs that you have running at your center. I'm sure it's very comprehensive, certainly with 3 locations. Talk to me about a particular initiative that you're doing right now that you and your team are especially excited about.
Well, one of them is that we 2 years ago, we felt that the Lord was calling us to really vamp up a fatherhood program. That is something that we've been working hard on. It's taken a long time. We had the vision for it, and we cast it, and we've just been praying through it. And it's just now, after 2 years of working very diligently on this program, that we're starting to have volunteers coming and saying, the Lord led me to come and be a part of this program. Yeah. It is our feeling that if we can get the fathers more emboldened and the fathers more involved, there's been an effort to silence them. I think it's just abhorrent. They're a child. They get to have a voice. And whether or not whatever their spouse or their girlfriend chooses to do with the baby, that they still should have options to be able to come and talk to somebody about it and find some support and help. So that's something we are very, very excited about. And we just signed off for a men's grief and loss program. And so now we actually have a gentleman that's going to head up the program. He has been a counselor for many, many years as a pastor at a church. He's now going to come on board with us. And it's so funny. It's like that Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Well, we started praying over this. Now we saw in the fatherhood program, we saw the need for abortion healing program. We added that on just recently, and it's the requests to join it are pouring in.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Absolutely pouring in. Men are desperate for healing. They're desperate for somebody to talk to. They're desperate for a voice. They've been told to be quiet for so long, but they have that inner pain and that needs to be touched. It needs to be talked to. And they just need the Lord to come in and give them some help to walk through that difficult journey because they need a voice. So those two are some of the 2 that we're very, very excited about. We are going to be working on our APR program. We're getting involved with that. And we have our nurse manager is phenomenal. And it's actually, we have a different type of a way we do things. We actually have a doctor's office that we refer to. And that doctor's office is in our center, but it's separate from us. So we do a referral program so that we have our pregnancy center around this doctor's office, and then we refer to the doctor's office, and then he gives all the medical services. So I have that at each one of my centers. I feel like it's a really, it's a way that we've been very successful in our journey so far. And it's worked out very well for us. So our nurse manager, we help train her for the doctor, and she is now getting the doctor involved in trying to find other staff and other doctors to work with to do the APR program. And we're very excited about that. I can't tell you, it's going to be, we've already had 3 that have been referred to us, and 2 of them, their children were saved.
Oh, praise God. And this is, again, as the point I was making before, like if you're pro-choice, you should be celebrating that.
Amen.
Because basically you're worshiping at the altar of choice.
That's right.
right? And you're basically making choice, the quote, the virtue, not what choice the person makes the virtue, but the choice itself, the virtue, right? And so I made this choice and I decided I wanted to change that. You should be like, yes. In fact, honestly, like for me, I'm like, why didn't the abortion industry come up with a reversal procedure?
Yes.
I mean, actually, frankly, would have been, I mean, there's money to be made in the reversal procedure because you went there for the service. Well, if you decide that you want to change it, you can come back to us and we'll give you the reversal, as well. You would think, but it just shows you that the ideology really is about, it's not really about that at all. It's not really even about a woman's choice. It's about
It's
a
not.
very specific perspective. And that's how we know that it comes from the pit of hell. That it's the
That's
evil one,
correct.
right?
Yeah. And even with California, what they've done in creating us as an abortion sanctuary state, they've
Yeah,
basically made all of its citizens a part of this malfeasance,
yeah,
and that we have no options. We don't have choice ourselves any longer. Our
yeah,
taxpayer dollars will go towards this, whether we like it or not.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a very difficult thing for a lot of us to contend with. We don't like that. And we feel like our voices should be heard, and it shouldn't be used for inappropriate things that go against our own
yeah.
beliefs and our own ideologies.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. Well, thank you for just what you're doing and loving what you're doing on the fatherhood front. As you know, that's an issue near and dear to my heart. And actually, at the men's summit that we did back in March, we actually launched a new fatherhood program specifically for post-abortive men, reclaiming fatherhood. I'm not sure if your team are aware of that or not.
That's the one we're using, actually.
Yes.
We
Well,
ordered
there
it.
you go.
Yes, we're using that one.
I will. That's fantastic. So yeah, we're super excited about that, and we just had, it was really interesting as when we did the first men's summit the year before. It was just one of these sort of random things we said. At least we thought random, but God does what He does, right? And we
Yes.
thought, well, we probably should have a time for people, guys who've been, who've been a part of abortion to sort of come forward and and have some prayer for that. And it was just a part of the programming that we just kind of honestly just shoehorned in at the last minute.
Mm,
And oh my gosh, the number of guys who came forward
yeah.
who were involved in abortions in the past, and just really the time extended over. And then we did video testimonies, and so many of the guys did testimonies about
Mm,
post abortion. So that this year when we did it, we said, no, we really need to make some space there, and we frankly worked really hard to get reclaiming fatherhood done, because we've had for years forgiven and set free, which a lot of sinners use that. We kind of revamped that and relaunched that,
yes.
and now reclaiming fatherhood, because we needed something for guys. And so I kind of look at people who had abortions in the past. I kind of talk about them as sort of an unreached people group, if you will. And because so many, the evil one just shames them by that decision, that they feel like they can't move forward, they can't be involved. They feel like I'm a hypocrite if I try to tell somebody else, not to have an abortion. No, that's called growth. Hypocrisy is continuing to do something you tell somebody not to do. Growth is when you did something and you tell folks, I learned from that, I grew from that. That's called growth, and we should be about that. So our big part of kind of what we're doing is really trying to mobilize, these folks who've had abortion in their past, and for them to be forgiven and set free,
Yeah.
to reclaim that which the enemy tried to steal from them, which God can restore. So
Amen.
thank you for all that you are doing in this work. And I'm so glad to have folks like you at the tip of the spear. I know you guys are in the middle of it, and it's been just a blessing to get to know you and to talk to you about the work that you're doing. So I
Thank you
appreciate that.
so much. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, listen, those of you out there in CareNet land, there's another edition of CareNet TV. We're on the move, so we may be coming your way soon. So may God bless you daily as you serve Him faithfully in all you do. Amen.